Alright guys, getting the technical stuff worked out. Give me a second, that's reverse. I'm trying to figure out how to make it landscape, but this might just be a vertical stream, which we can work with. So I got my RDX, got my aluminum chassis here, and the goal is to kind of refresh this chassis. It's always as if as soon as something is driving really well for me, I like to change everything. But we all know the only constant is change. All right, get this angle set here. All right, do you guys want the camera angle far wide or tight? I'm gonna be working something like that. So, let's start here. This is my ReveD RDX Scarab, and it is kind of a hodgepodge of parts that I've made for myself over the past year or so. And then the reason I keep coming back to the RDX is because it just drives so awesome. And people ask me all the time, like, what do I prefer, the Rookie Drift 2.0 or the RDX? And RDX has been my favorite. It's just worked. So this was a chassis I made through Senketsen a little while ago, and then I ran it a couple times but never really gave it a chance. It's super lightweight. It's 6000 series aluminum, and it's 2 mil thick, so very lightweight, comparable to a carbon fiber chassis. So what I'm going to do here is kind of swap everything over and show you how I set up a new chassis as far as tuning, tucking the wires, setting up the width for the body and all that stuff. Just because I've had some issues with the rear of this, I extended the arms a little bit and went back to a stock spring for the weight when I'm running the GoPro. And along with the new floor polish and layout down at scale, it's been a little difficult to dial this thing in. So that's the goal today, kind of share my thought process. I have a few different battery tray options that I'm going to play with. So I have the stock Scarab battery tray, super lightweight, simple. And then I have one of my titanium battery trays. This is a vertical mount. The other battery tray is horizontal. So see what feels right when we get there, and I'll start taking this thing apart. I'm going to start, just take the wheels off real quick and then remove all the electronics. I'm going to be running my same S15 body, so the body posts, all that stuff shouldn't have to change. And then, yeah, so figured I'd do this on a live stream just to kind of fill dead space and maybe share the shit that floats around in my head when I'm doing this, because I don't really have maybe the same tuning ideas as other people. I don't know. All right, so yeah, let's see here. Pretty sweet angle. I hope that wasn't sarcastic. I can change it. I didn't know this was going to be vertical when I set it up. I was planning on this to be a horizontal, but hopefully you guys can see what's going on. All right, got the wheels off. I'll just kind of work my way down, get things unplugged and removed. Got these wires nicely tucked. Nobody likes messy wiring. you guys have any setup questions or anything, be sure to ask them there in the comments and do my best to answer them. It's my first like real drift motor I ever bought, and absolutely love it. Still running it. Can't even count how many battery packs have been through that. And then let's see, get bumper off. This is going to be awkward. I put nylocks on this rear bumper because kept vibrating loose. They're tight. So another little pro tip, I love using this titanium hardware, and if you guys are looking for it, it's by this drone company called iFlight, and then you can buy whatever sizes, and I just keep a bag of spare titanium hardware. It's light, it's strong. I've enjoyed using it more than the colored aluminum hardware, just because that stuff seems to be pretty soft aluminum, and then hex heads tend to strip them fairly easily. I like cranking my stuff down. I don't use Loctite or anything, just because I take these things apart so often. All right, and then in here I have this battery tray was covering my wiring mess, so that's something we're going to try to clean up today. But this is the Mile High RC underglow kit. Super rad. Makes the car look awesome at night. Go ahead and take it out for right now. Set that aside. And then each strip I just double-sided sticky tape because I knew I was gonna put them somewhere else. Yeah, and Mile High RC, these are super rad LED strips, and they can be cut kind of conform to anything, but he sells these as a kit. Comes with a light controller, Y splitter, I believe 4 sets of those LED strips, so it is a pretty cool kit. Got this new Yokomo SPO2 plastic servo. I like it. I don't always think you need to spend a lot of money on servos, and the ones that I have spent a lot of money on, I just don't like the feeling. That's a preference thing, or I don't know how to tune them. Probably both. But, let's see here. Another thing, little pro tip that I do when I'm building chassis, is I keep a bag of shims. These are 1 mil shims, and then I also have a bag of like washers and smaller shims. That way, depending on the chassis I'm building, there's different tolerances that you'll need to shim the arms or shim the offset of the servo horn, things like that. So it's good to have shims around building a new chassis along with all the hardware you're going to want to use. Alright, so working on that servo there. Let's see. There's the servo. Just has a piece of vinyl over it, keep it black. I think the idea with this chassis is just kind of bling it out, make it look like a piece of art that slides really well. So don't need to adjust anything there. I'll set that aside. Continue disassembling the rat's nest down here. So this is my fan splitter. Homemade. And then take everything out of the receiver. Futaba. It's nice, but I probably don't need it. And then the RS or Revox gyro. Feel pretty comfortable with this gyro. It works. I'm gonna go through and do fresh sticky tape on everything. And then I really got the wires tucked up there, so in order to get the top deck off, I think I'm gonna have to swing the front two pieces around. I'll do that real quick. These are titanium top rails I made, and then I burnt them, give them that blue purple look. So those just can swing out of the way there. I can get these standoffs off. Here's another, sorry, here's another little trick I did for people who want to change the gearing on the RDX. What I actually did was I used a Tamiya TT02 spur gear adapter, put it over the top shaft, and it's been working great. So that way I have an 86 tooth pinion, and then I run between a 20, 22, or a 24. Depending on what's feeling better. And then this is my Hobby Wing XD10 ESC, and I got my sensor cable wrapped around the trans brace. So there's that. Finish these top decks. So there is one of the top decks, two-piece, unlike some of the one-piece stuff you see. I just thought it looked cool, and it adds a bunch of rigidity to the RDX, or this my Scarab chassis here. I think it was fun to play with the flex deck idea, but I really think that rigid chassis drive a lot better, a lot more responsive. Same thing with having the battery too high. I think having all that weight shifting just it takes too much time for the car to transition, and it might look cool in scale, but it is difficult to drive accurately. And that's me, that's my opinion, not the results other people get. So now we got it broken down into front and rear bulkheads, and I'm going to disassemble the front first, and then probably go a little more in depth into the rear, because that's where I've been having problems. I just think I have these arms too wide for the shock position, and along with running a low offset wheel, these are only 6s. I wanted to go back to my works because I just think those look so rad, and they'll look dope on the S15. So let's get that front bulkhead off, and what I'm going to do is take the shocks off just so they don't blow all the shims out of the rear arm when you take that off. RDX is nice because you just take the shock tower right off. Again, titanium hardware. Drone guys, iFlight, they know what's up. Pretty good prices too, I think. It's 10 or 20 bucks for 10 screws of whatever size you need. Shock tower, really happy with my front shocks. I run 8-hole piston. There are 4 larger holes and 4 smaller holes. And then I'm running 150 weight, or 150 CST, so a little thicker. But I think having a heavier front end on the RDX, and that's just relative to what an all plastic front end on an RDX is. This one has the ReveD aluminum arms, the ReveD aluminum bell crank, and then the ReveD aluminum knuckles. And then these are the adjustable hubs in there. And if you didn't see the tuning video I did recently, or the maintenance, RC drift car maintenance video, I go over how I clean my bearings. It seems to work pretty well. These things spin really well. And then arms are good, so basically I'm just going to take the entire bulkhead off, and then it will all come out, and I'll just have to keep those toe arms together. But I'll just swap it right over to the new chassis. I guess we can go upside down here. Nice, you have a weight shift car and an RDX for comp. Nice. Yeah, that's the way to go. I have the LP86 kind of set up to be a weeble wobbly thing, but it is, I'll be honest, difficult to drive for me. It's fun, but I've been having a lot of fun with my Rookie Drift 2.0. I have it set up to be an outside car, and it has a brushed motor, and a brushed DSC is super simple, but it shreds. I have the idea I want to put on some rubber tires and go hit some jumps with it. Still got the LP in the box. Nice. They're fun. It's definitely not the same type of car as the RDX, but they're unique in their own way. Can play with the stiffness of the rear foams and stuff, make it wobble. I don't think I know what a Novak rooster is. And just gonna keep these toe blocks together. Alright, move the old chassis over. Get this new chassis in. See if I get some restarted. That one's being difficult. Alright, not going to struggle too much. So I'm only going to tighten these loosely. And then I can square them all up when I get the rest of the bulkhead on. So now the steering rack and front bulkhead mount. Line those suckers up. Again, just kind of loosely getting these in, and then I will square everything up. Old brush that you see on those, that's cool. Heck yeah, you gotta make what works. I like having fun with old oddball stuff. I'm not a spring chicken myself, but these new cars, the technology is blowing my mind. And then being able to design stuff and have it at your door the next week is pretty cool. Sencut Sim's been a huge, we're not a sponsor, not a partner, but just a huge benefit in my design and prototyping process. It's been so cool to make stuff like this. I'm just kind of playing around on the computer one night and had my other chassis, had the Scarab already designed, had the Manta already designed, and then I just wanted to see how much I could actually cut out with remaining rigid, but keeping it lightweight. And that's kind of how this chassis was born. And it is a 101, but I still have the file, so I could potentially make more. I'll tell you right now, it wasn't cheap, but I think it's kind of worth it to have like a cool, unique chassis. Everyone's always about getting GOMs. watch, because of the latest RC Drift Comp in Japan, the winner was on a GRK5. So I bet there's going to be a lot of people building GRK5s. Alright, so arm's a little tight there. Probably because I gotta shimmy that around a little bit. Alright, and then I can go ahead and put the servo back on. Interesting. There's a weird noise coming. And then just put the shock tower back on. Front end's pretty much done there. Pretty quick, simple swap. All right, there's our front end complete. And we'll move on to the rear end, getting that one disassembled. So here's the cool thing that you can kind of see now, but the design for the Scarab, I did reverse flex cutouts, so then the battery tray mounted onto this part, so it actually flexes differently than, say, if you put the pivot point back here and cut it so just the tail section was independent. That was kind of one of the ideas, and people seem to love it. I love it, but I'm gonna try out the aluminum one again and see how that goes. Moving on to the rear, I did want to make changes on the rear arms, so I'm going to remove the shocks completely, and then maybe check my rear shocks oil, because like I said, they weren't rebounding like I wanted them to. Kind of just leaned and sat, hence going for the stiffer spring on there. And it could be because I'm running the GoPro in the car sometimes. Alright, rear shocks are off, and then I have 4 mil worth of shims to space the top of the shock out, just because I am running Yokomo lower arms and toe blocks, so the shock positioning on the arm is different than what the stock RDX has. And then I'm going to take off the camber arm here, and well, I guess I don't need to, I can do this straight from underneath. I'll pull the arm shim out. And I actually just need to loosen these just a little bit. And shim them. Poke the shim out. So I had 2 mil shims in the arms, and since I'm going to run a wider offset wheel, I'm actually going to narrow the arm, and that is going to actually soften the suspension because it's bringing the wheel will be acting on a shorter arc, or the arm is working on a shorter lever ratio. So we'll see how that does, because I think I can narrow the front up just a little bit with a wider wheel. I'll figure that out when I get there. So running 6 mil offset wheels with a 2 mil shim in the arm, and now I've removed the 2 mil, so we're shorter, narrower by 4 millimeter, and then I will compensate that with my wider Stance Boy wheel, which the offset should equal out if these are 8 mils. So let's see here. Again, just take everything off, put it directly onto the new chassis. So when I'm doing this too, another tip is I won't remove both sides of the toe block right away, just so I have one screw on each holding it together, and I'll get the full transmission unbolted, and then remove the 2 toe block screws, just because I have a bunch of shims in here, and I actually think I'm going to change the shim layout, just because I think these arms are sticky, and that's probably part of my suspension issue. Well, I shouldn't say think, I know having a sticky arm is part of my suspension issue. Hi Logan, thanks for joining us. Alright, transmission is free. Get these other toe blocks off. Running the D and the E. I have a number 1 block in the front, and then a number 4 block in the rear, facing inward. I believe that gives me about negative 1.9 degrees of toe in the rear. I had it all the way up to like 2.6 degrees, but it was just a little too much when you're off throttle, the car would pull in super aggressively. And then we have our blank Scarab chassis there, so I can set that on the side. And then we'll get this one flipped over. I'll do the toe blocks once it's on. Honestly, the struggle is about to get awkward. Just gonna start a couple by hand. And my toe block's already came apart. Alright, things should hold together there. These lines are cute. Just got a good VO2 max, dude. I used to race mountain bikes. I also skied competitively for like 20 years, so I'm not a couch potato. What parts he putting on there? This is a ReveD RDX with a bunch of my own parts that I've designed. This is kind of a mix match. I'm using Yokomo toe blocks and Yokomo rear arms, ReveD front arms, ReveD gearbox, ReveD bell crank, and then all my titanium top deck. Got all my hobby wing electronics. Kind of show you guys how I do a wire tuck, how I start a chassis. No one really likes a wire mess. Plus, I think this chassis just looks cool, and it's a 101, so it's not like there's a bunch of them out there. And then I drilled this deck also so you could run stock ReveD RDX toe blocks on the lower arm if that's what you have. So this is just an idea. It's come to fruition, and I wanted to make some changes because the rear end I was having trouble with, probably because I think my arms are sticky. So I'm gonna actually remove the rear toe block and then reshim the rear end with a thinner washer. And then on the rear toe block, I also run a 1 mil pro squat spacer, and that raises the rear of the arm, allows the car to squat a little more, especially during weight transfer. You load the rear up, and then you have all the traction. So those are 0.5 mil shims, and then the front, I do have a pretty big, that's probably 2 mil shim. So I'm going to change my 2 mil to a 1 mil. And then see if I still have too much slop or too much stick. And then the hardest part for me is these CDVs pop out every time. That, put my 1 mil on the back. This is also a way you can finely tune the wheelbase on the body that you run. So let's say you had something that you needed to shorten the wheelbase because of the body you're running. You can move the shims to the rear of the arm, and that will actually push the arm forward a little bit. And you can do the same thing on your front arms. That's the nice part about having these adjustable toe blocks. It allows me to make rear toe changes, but it also allows me to kind of adjust the positioning of my wheels on different bodies. So something I like to do. And then we'll see if these are too sloppy. I'm gonna leave that loose so I can get my 1 mil shim. There we are. Gonna loosen the front block a little bit, and then slowly snug everything down. And then what I don't want are these arms to be rattling or moving, and you can maybe see that that is a nice solid fit. And then you want these to just move nice and free. So that's a lot better than where it was with these thicker 2 mil shims. I'm just gonna set those aside where I can find them later. Might need them for something else. So give those a final little torque down. Do you like chassis? You have to run Yokomo CDV in the rear as well due to the length of run. I'm using stock ReveD 47 mil CDVs with these short arms. It's because the rear toe block is actually wider than stock RDX toe blocks are shorter. So I didn't have that issue. When I did change the CDVs is when I ran the front toe blocks on the rear, so I can make a really narrow wheelbase. There's a video a little ways back of the mini drift truck I built, but that one actually ran like 42 mil or something, maybe 38 or 37 mil. They were quite a bit shorter. And then this has a CLSD, so I don't know if the outdrive cups are a different size compared to the stock plastic diff. I do have a stock RDX here I can pull out after I get this finished up. And then the way I have these rear camber arms set up is kind of in the stock position, but running a longer one. That rolls the leading wheel to a flatter contact patch as the car's drifting. But I think I'm going to try to maybe shorten these back up and then go one hole in, since the arm is shorter now. And then we can throw this on the alignment rack too after. See if I got a turnbuckle wrench around here. There it is. So look at my thread direction, and then I'm just gonna snug these up and then move the hole. And this is one thing that I actually changed more than I like to admit, just because sometimes I'll change the rear camber and the way the camber arms are set, and the car will drive great, and then the next time I drive it, it drives not how I want it to. So I think I had better luck with a shorter upper rear camber arm, one hole in from the back of the hub. Just kind of eyeballing it right now. I'll throw some calipers on it when I'm ready to finish everything. Then I'm going to change where it mounts to the rear knuckle. And I'm doing this because I think our track now, after it just was resurfaced, and with the LF5 tires we were running, it seemed to be kind of a ton of side bite, not a lot of forward bite. And that could come down to how my ESC is tuned too, and you can check that out here in a bit. Get the electronics mounted up. So new arm layout, see how that works. And then we'll move on to get the top deck on, so then I'll know how and where my electronics will be mounted. Let me know down in the comments, guys, if do you prefer the rear mount ESC or center mount? I used to be all about the rear mount, but after a lot of driving, I went back to a mid-mount ESC. So, get the top deck started here. And this mounts where the stock RDX battery tray would mount, under the transmission brace. And I'll leave it snug but not tight. And then I can put the standoff in, and I actually use the standoff in the underside of the top deck to kind of hide wires. It goes into my wire tuck trick. then this top deck design actually goes to the outer front bulkhead, which I think helps kind of brace it, give it some rigidity. Look at my long top deck. Yeah, usually most Yokomo stuff's all cross compatible. The RD2 is a new design, so it has that curved rear toe block, and I think that's because they actually moved. They were trying to mimic the RDX, so you can see how far back this transmission sits. It's pretty much over just the rear tongue of the chassis. And then if you look at the RD2, it's back to the rear toe block, and then the rear toe block wraps around the transmission. And I think that's to keep the wheelbase even for what most bodies are out on the market. And yeah, so rear's looking good. I mean, the shocks feel like there's a little air in there, so maybe I can fix those. I got my other ReveD springs too. And then these standoffs are just braces for the top deck. And then having those 3 points of contact between the top deck across the chassis makes this thing really rigid. And I think that gives it really good response. I feel like carbon fiber chassis they drive so nice, and they have this quality about just the material, how it kind of absorbs vibrations, and then it still flexes. So cool properties, along with being how light it is. Just thought it was cool to have an anodized chassis. All right, so there's the base chassis. There is no flex. Thing looks really cool. So now it's kind of figuring out where I want the electronics to go and how I'm going to hide the wires, along with deciding which battery tray. So maybe I can put a poll up here really quick and then you guys can vote. But I have the horizontal battery tray that mounts across, something like that. And then actually it might only work with really high standoffs. Could maybe do something different and mount it on the bottom and have a low mount battery. But then I have the parallel battery tray. So this mounts like this. Could possibly mount. Maybe not. And then I have my simple carbon fiber tray with different mounting holes, so then I can adjust where I want the weight of the battery. And then the other variable here that I know I was just ragging on, but I have different size standoffs, so then I can decide how high I want that battery tray to mount. But I have a thought of maybe trying that lower It's almost like the factory mounting. But then I gotta think about where I'm gonna put the ESC. And I have in the past run it upside down under the battery tray. So that can be an option. And then the receiver can mount under. Gyro kind of has its own place. Mount my gyro mid-deck. It's been debunked. Gyro placement has no change on gyro's action, so it doesn't matter where you mount the gyro. You see some of the guys in Japan mount them on the front bumper for weight distribution. Some double-sided sticky tape here. Yeah, the only thing about adding the standoff I'm concerned about is then I won't be able to slide the battery under the top deck. But we can give it a shot here and take a look. Get that gyro on there. And then my motor, I mount the terminals upside down. My RDX motor plate is spaced out 2 mil, and that allows you to have more bite on the pinion with the shaft of the motor. And then I can hide all my wires underneath, and I really like that aspect. Depending on where the ESC mounts as well, because I could also mount the ESC on the rear back here, and then that leaves more room for the battery. But like I said, it's kind of my brainstorm process when I'm building a new chassis. It's not necessarily a given science, but really all tuning is playing with things, changing things to get them to feel the way you want them to feel. Some people really like high batteries, some people like low batteries, some people like rear mount ESCs because the rear of the car can have a little pendulum effect and swing the rear into corners, and then with a lot of rear toe in, you can stay on throttle and still have a lot of forward bite. And then a lot of that comes down to the gear ratio you run, because depending on when you get on throttle in the corner, that's gonna make everything else react to how the geometry is set up. Alright, so I got my motor. Do I run it? And then maybe I'll put the receiver just behind the gyro. And then I can hide my servo wires under the top deck. Let me grab a battery real quick so I can kind of see how this all comes together. Alright, so here is my battery. And that is the round battery tray. I could take the rear. If I take this rear arm off, it would tuck the battery right up to the motor. And that's not too bad. Nobody drifts nitro. That's why you're an average rubber chicken. Alright, so just kind of eyeballing this. So the only problem putting it there is I'm not able to get it out. Let's try something. Battery sitting right there. It is a Gens Ice Redline 130C 2200. Yeah, that's a good idea, Donovan. Maybe I'll throw it on the scales after. I actually built this battery tray is shorter on one side, longer on the other, so I just need to figure out. Kick it up forward. With the short standoff, let me try this real quick. I have to get a different color than purple for that though. They look nice when I had my purple AccuMate set up. But then that way you can see those standoffs are just over that top deck. And then that should allow me to mount my battery tray right on top of those. Let's try it out real quick. Keep picking up this 3 mil. Don't need that. Still a little room. Still a little loose. I could come up with a solution to that, but that's kind of the idea of where I want, how high I want the battery to be. I can try a couple more things here. Actually, might be able to get away with running it further back too. Get this little standoff off. Oh, it's so close. All right, one more try. So now I know my ESC can go under there. My receiver can go just in front of this battery tray. All right, so there. Wonder if this gave me the mill that I need. Did not. So the solution here is just to pop it forward. Now I'll have to figure out a way to keep that snug there. Maybe do something wild. And this one fits. Go back to that horizontal. I could spend all day going back and forth and trying to find the optimum position. I'd probably go re-drill some holes so I could micro adjust that one. But this one does have the logo cut out, so it's pretty cool. I like that. Simple. Sits right there. And then I'll be able to tuck the ESC right back there. I think that'll be a nice look. Minus the color of the standoffs. Oh. I'm not too ready. Excuse me. All right. get some of this stuff out of the way. And now we're going to use that battery tray. Ah, we're back. Sorry, I didn't know I glitched out there. Phone didn't overheat. All right. Get this tape. Throw on some fresh double-sided. And this little piece for the receiver. Nice fat slab of sticky tape. This is the part where you got to think about how you're going to route all the cables and wires. Luckily mine have been kind of in a position where they have a memory. And then I'm going to take this standoff off to make that easier to get in. Yeah, double-sided tape is definitely your best friend. I use multiple rolls per year. That's what I use to mount the camera on the car, and the reels that I post is the double-sided sticky tape. Sticks the camera on the roof. Can pop it on and off super easy. So, get those wires where they're all going to go, and then I'm going to keep them in the line so I know A, B, and C. Weave my sensor cable out of the way, down and around the transmission mount, and then that can come back up to the motor. I still haven't peeled the back on that sticky tape because I'm going to slide it in. So the idea is to tuck it back just like that and make some nice, neat ESC mounting position, and then all the wires are hidden back against the transmission. I got my A, B, and C. So now we'll get that double-sided tape off and get it stuck down. I'm separating my batteries. And then A is my shortest wire. Okay, just double checking. If you plug your brushless motor in wires in backwards, your motor will do some crazy stuttering. Ask me how I know. And give that a good press. I can get my motor connected up. All right, A, B, and C. Let me just double check. Just gonna tuck my wires back there a little bit. You don't want to kink them. And then battery leads have plenty to come up. And then the sensor cable plug right in the back like that. And then I'm pretty neat and tidy wire in there. So I really like doing it that way, just tucking all the unnecessaries out of sight. I think it makes a nice clean looking chassis. And then the receiver. Mess that up. Alright. Receiver's going to go in between the gyro and the ESC. And you know what they say, 1 to turn, 2 to burn. Got that in the number 2 spot. The gyro, I then took the wires over that and then back and around the standoff just to take the slack off this pigtail that's coming out of the gyro. And if you give me a sec to weave it in, I'll show you how it looks. It always gets a little tight when you're trying to tuck all this stuff. Alright, and then I have my fan lead, my detail. So this is so I could plug in my lights and my fan. And I'm still not sure if I'll run the lights. But then I have a power lead for when I do. This is a bit of a meticulous process, so I don't know how in depth I'll go here. So then on my servo cable, I'll show you this just because I like doing it this way. But I'll run the wire under the top deck, and then it kind of hides it. And I'll put a piece of sticky tape to where it plugs into the gyro, and then just tuck it underneath. That way it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And if I need to tune the gyro or anything, it's easy to unplug that rather than digging back into that receiver nightmare. Let's take a little piece of this double-sided, snip a bit for the top of the connector. Go ahead and connect those two. And I'll take this other little piece and throw it on the wire. And I'll just keep the wire tucked up out of the way. And then pop the battery tray on. Power that stand off first. And then make sure I don't put those batteries. I might have to rewire these just because I made this one have a little more length. It's tucked up under the motor wire. Alright, positive, negative, they are different lengths. And then I heat shrink them just because you don't want to plug those in backwards, and I have, hence the new cap on the Hobby Wing there. Made one smoke not too long ago. Alright, front shocks, front wheels. I can pull the alignment rack out. Maybe I should put the scales first. Throw the wheels on, throw it on the scales. I won't be able to show you guys though, because my phone is live streaming, so I actually have another scale right here. Put the rear shocks on. I don't think I'm gonna have time to do a full shock build here. I could do do a whole video. Maybe I will. Put my shims back on my shock tower. Get my 3 nail back. Throw the bumper back on. Sucker's tight. Battery, then we just need some wheels. Better check to see, these are pretty new, so I'll put the fronts on the rear and the rear on the front, then they'll wear evenly. Some good looking wheels right there. Oh yeah, immediately the shocks feel better, although we got some serious positive camber. Just gonna eyeball this real quick and then see if I'll throw it on the rack. I run anywhere between -2 and -4 degrees of negative camber in the rear. And I've said it many times before, but the reason you don't run 0 in the rear unless you have a solid axle, but when the car's drifting, your lead wheel is actually moving, and so the top of the wheel is moving out. So if you are statically set to 0 degrees of camber, when you roll to the outside, you're rolling to the outside of this tire, where you're not going to have much control and grip. So when you set these wheels to between -3 and 4 degrees of negative camber, when the chassis rolls, the entire tire is flat against the ground, and that's where all your weight and drive is. So just something to keep in mind when you're doing an alignment on your RC drift car. If you want to check out my alignment video, I go into some detail and show a couple different ways to set your alignment. One's just a simple way to do it at the track using a camber gauge and checking both sides against each other. But the rear suspension feels way better. Caster is also very important. Caster is important in the front end, not, you have no caster in the rear. Having a double shear mount rear hub, so there's no caster on your wheel. Caster is your point on your front knuckle, this angle, that this would be your caster angle. So I run between 5 and 7 degrees of caster. The rule of thumb and feeling is the more caster you run on the front, the slower the transition is going to be, or sorry, the more caster is going to be more stable while the car's pitched sideways. But having lower caster allows the car to transition faster and have more reaction on the front end. So I don't like to set a ton, and I know some people run up to 9 degrees, 10 degrees. And it just kind of makes the car feel lazy in transition for me. Like, it really likes to sit at angle. So bringing that up to like 6 or 5 degrees still allows me to flick the car. And then I would adjust my stability with the toe out on the front wheel. And I think people get too involved with Ackerman and how parallel the steering is. And then they show it like this while the suspension's unloaded. And you have no real reference. So when you load the arms, you can see the caster, or the Ackerman changes, and the toe on the trailing wheel changes. So Ackerman is actually the rate at which these wheels are turning. And actually, if you have more questions on Ackerman and the Ackerman sweep, check out FDF Race Shop. That guy is an alignment master, and I've watched all his videos many times setting up my real car and my RC cars. But he built a really cool rack, and then he 3D printed this plate with both wheels, and then it has gauges on it, and you can change the point at where the tow rods meet the knuckle, and then you can physically see the difference of where that knuckle mounts to your steering rack in relation to the knuckle will change the full Ackerman sweep of the car. So that's something cool that gives you a visual reference on how changing the mounting location from the knuckle to the steering rack will actually change the Ackerman sweep. Just a good visual reference. I'm kind of like a set it and forget it type of guy on that stuff, because it works out of the box settings. You don't need to change things. But however, if you change a knuckle or your steering rack, you go from a belt crank to a slide rack, you would want to adjust that and check. So I have a cheat scale here, and just get a quick reference because I can't pull out my corner balance since I'm filming on my phone. But I got this zeroed out to 0 grams. And then I'll set the chassis there. 1,164 grams. Let's see if I can get that on camera. So it's still relatively pretty light. It's not too heavy. But then when I add a GoPro on there, it gets pretty heavy. So the other thing I want to do real quick is I'm going to check how the body mounts on that. And boy, those rear shocks feel a lot better. I could actually maybe change the spring. But now you can see the rear wheel is more centered. And then since I did shorten them up, these wheels look like they poke just a little more. Not the worst thing in the world. And the front definitely pokes a lot more. I might have to do some trimming or raise the body post a little bit. But that takes some time. I don't need to do that on the live stream. But I think that thing looks sick. It's nice and stanced out with those wheels on it. And then what do you guys think? Should I throw it? Do you want to see this on the alignment rack? I can throw it on there and then we can do a quick overview on wheel alignments. So what don't I need? Clean up here for a minute. Two, the turnbuckle. All right. Donovan, that's for the alignment. Let's do it. I think that's probably the most useful piece of information when getting these things set up. All right, one sec, guys. My wife is calling. All right, I think we're back. Okay, so sorry about that. Pull this alignment rack out real quick. My rear cameras, I just went over that. I run -2 to -3 degrees in the rear. Alright, I'm going to attempt to show you guys so you can see. Yeah, and like I said before too, it depends, Mr. P, on how you have that rear camber arm set up on the knuckle, because that's going to determine on how much that knuckle rotates under compression, like when the car's drifting onto that lead wheel. So some people, if you raise this rear camber arm to the top hole and then you lean, you're gonna have a more consistent wheel transfer. So the rear wheel is not gonna rotate as much, but then under squat it is going to camber in more. So my idea on that is that I've tried it and ran it a bunch, but it is like a really aggressive setup, and it's kind of hard to chase people because you really got to be on one and you got to huck the car and let it lean, and it just kind of, it's finding that sweet spot, because -5 and -3 can feel totally different. And I of course moved it a hole in, and then now I'm probably off on both sides, but by just eyeballing it, it looks like that one's almost -2, and then this one's right at -2. So I'm gonna make sure this probably isn't terribly level, but bounce the suspension a little bit and then go back and look. And so I know this one needs to come in to match that one, and I will probably just take it up to -3 and 2.5. Let's go to 3. It's a good middle number to start at, and then I know if the car's too grippy, like on the lean, then I can pull a little camber out and it'll loosen it, or I can add camber to make it slip a little easier, or I can take camber out to grip it up for side bite. So that's right about 3 there, and then I'm just going to turn this one a few times to get it at -3. Here. This one needs to go just a touch more. All right, so -3, -3. Good place to start. Check out the front. And it's gonna be hard for you to see at this angle. But hang on one sec, guys. Apologies. Wife was taking the Chipotle lunch order. All right, toe block. I'm gonna try. I'm at +2 degrees of toe out. Sorry, neighbors. And normally you do this with your car on, but I know my front end is square. I didn't change anything. This one maybe looks like it's probably +3 degrees of toe out. And so you can go back, look at the camber. I'm at -9 and -9 on that. And then if you want to see the caster, you measure this by putting a wrench in your kingpin. And then this wrench is loose, but you can see I'm right about 6 or 7 degrees of caster. And the way I would change that on the RDX is move the shims either on your top arm or your lower arm to move your arm forward or backward. You would move your top arm backward and your bottom arm forward to increase caster, and you'd move your front arm forward and your bottom arm backward to reduce caster. And then depending on the knuckle that you run on the front, that can also affect your caster. But since these knuckles are made for the RDX, it has the proper kingpin inclination and mounting points. It's just checking the shims, which I don't think I'm running shims on the toe arm to correct bump steer, but no shims on the knuckle side. And that may be something that they suggest when you do it, but I've had pretty good luck running it like this. So yeah, that's kind of the basic rundown on my alignments. Is there any other questions that you guys had pertaining to setting up a new RC drift car or anything like that? Because happy to maybe answer any right now. It's kind of hard for me to be a comment section consultant, and I think a lot of people here, not here particularly, but online, have all these very unique questions, and I don't have all the time in the world to sit there and type them out. So I try to answer them in videos that you guys can come back and find here, and hopefully come back for reference if you need more assistance or you need any tuning tricks. I got other videos on electronics tuning, stuff like that. Be sure to check those out. My spur and pinion, I went over that earlier too. I'm a 86 tooth pinion, or 86 tooth spur. And then this right here is a 22 tooth, but I'll run between a 20 and a 24. That puts me between a 9 and a 10 FDR. And I'm running a 10.5 turn motor. I got boost and turbo turned down to about 7 or 8. And then I have a pretty soft ramp on those. And then just depending on our track layout just changed, so I've been experimenting between a 22 and a 24, and then that's, I believe, like a 9.7 or a 10.0 FDR. So in the differential, I'm running 8 gears with 8 hard springs, and that gives me pretty good lockup. And yeah, that's that setup. Again, the pro tip on mounting the spur. Our track is polished concrete, yes. 10.5, because that's what I have. I don't see why these cars would need any more torque than what they already have. It's like driving a 4,000 or 5,000 horsepower car at scale, but that's a personal preference, really, in the end, and how you want your car to feel. And I can tell you guys my exact setup, and then you can take it, and it might be terrible on your track. So it's really getting your setup dialed to how you want the end result to feel. And a lot of it can come into electronic tuning too. You don't need to do a whole lot normally. I like to suggest just driving your car and getting a feel for it, because that's going to tell you where you should make changes or where you should make modifications. And I think new guys come into the hobby and they see people tinkering on these things and changing things all the time, when in reality they should probably focus on their driving and focus on driving a good line. And I put a short out yesterday, and I wasn't trying to rag on anybody like I think some people thought, but when you have somebody who's driving a super tight inside line while you're drifting, and they're up here, we do the international hand reference for drifting. Let's say this is the lead car going into a hairpin. So he's throwing a lot of angle. And then what I've been seeing at the track a lot is people driving on the inside. And what's happening there is, by the time this chase car is getting into where the lead car is slowing up for the hairpin, they're into the front wheel and knocking wheels with the lead car, and then that lead car can't pull out. And then if you look at the video, these people are even like passing on the inside thinking we're racing when we're trying to drive clean tandem lines. And you can't drive a clean tandem line if someone's driving on the inside like this. So word when you're learning to drive or you're new to the track, definitely talk to people and like ask them, or you can even just watch and see how they drive. And you notice that the guys who are smooth and driving inconsistent lines, the chase car is actually driving to the rear wheel. You're looking at basically look where the gas tank is on the car, because then that's going to allow you to back up. And what I do, and I come from a world of real drifting where I competed for 5 or 6 years drifting real cars. So I was always told to look at the gas tank, because that's where you're going to know when the lead car is going to make a transition. And that being a good chase driver, you have to assume when that lead car is going to transfer and when he's going to transition. That way you can get off gas, let his rear bumper or hers sweep in front of you, and then you're able to tuck back up into their rear fender and sit there. And they call it getting doors, because when you're drifting properly and you're back, and let's say somebody's in a coupe, you can put your front wheel right on their door, and just sit there. And as long as you're confident in the abilities of the lead driver and you guys kind of know how each other drive, you can sit there along the whole track and transition. You can come in, tap his door, lift, let him transition, dive back up. Problem is when you drive an inside line and then you see this person try to transition, you're often impeding that person. And if this were competition, you would get the zero. The point of driving tandems is having fun with your friends and staying consistent. And when you get multiple laps over and over of no real impact and you're just kind of in this flow state where you're transitioning, tucking back up, transitioning, tucking back up. And it's one of those feelings that still gives me joy coming from the real cars, where it's kind of like you try to think about it after you're done driving and you're like, holy cow, I like felt it that time. The car was getting it. And I have tons of other videos driving with people, and you can tell who I have a lot of laps with because I'm confident in their ability and I know when they're going to transition, I know when they're going to initiate, and that allows me to stay really consistent on their door. So that's really one of the joys I find with these scale cars, is being able to drive reckless and put it on people's doors and be super accurate and being smooth. That is like the epitome of joy in this hobby for me. And I'm glad to see you guys agree too. That's awesome. Like, it's definitely, yeah, if you kind of look at the rear of the car, you'll see when their wheels stop accelerating or when they're getting ready to transition, you're often lifting. It's very rare that you're flat foot transitioning. So when you see that lead car kind of lift and lighten up, that's when you know you can lift fully, let them transition, dive back up. It's so fun. It's really cool. I wish I could like insert little video clips, but this is only my second live stream, so maybe I can figure that out, because I have a ton of clips where I was trying to like drive certain ways so I could explain different scenarios, but it's really hard to film that stuff unplanned, I guess. But yeah, that's my theory, and of course that's just my opinion. I know other people have different opinions, and that's fine. That's like the great part of playing with these toy cars, is they are so good, and then tuning them and making those changes and then feeling if the car has gotten better or if the car has gotten worse. Hence the reason why I swapped this stuff over. My car was driving really good, but I had that rear end problem, and now I think the rear is a lot better. So I can strap these wheels back up again. Just gonna put the rears on the front, fronts on the rear. And then, yeah, let me know if there's any other questions out there. Otherwise, I'll probably wrap this one up, guys. But I gotta say, thanks for tuning in. It's been fun. It's only my second live stream, but thought it'd be cool to kind of show you guys how I build my track car. I do have the rookie drift here too, if anyone wanted to see that. Set it up as an outside basher. I'm trying to film some outside spots and maybe take it out to some urban locations for some different types of drifting compared to all the track videos I've been filming. And then if you haven't already, go back and check out my maintenance video, because these wheels spin forever. Outside of the RDX, what's your other favorite chassis? I don't know if I have another favorite. The RDX is my favorite. Just has worked so well and it's so simple. I have enjoyed the Rookie Drift 2.0. It's a great chassis. I'll just prop this up so you can watch it spin. I'll grab the Rookie Drift real quick, because it's cool. It's a little different. Rookie Drift. Let me pop the body off. everyone, I shouldn't keep saying that, but with this car, I wanted to keep it super simple, and then I wanted to take it outside and bash it. So everything is plastic, minus I threw a set of big bores because I had them as backups, and then it's got a brushed Tamiya super stock RZ motor. Maybe we can compare these two. And then a Hobbywing 1080 ESC. It's got the AGF RC V3 gyro and the AGF RC A50 BHL servo. Great budget-friendly servo. And then stock plastic. You can see this sucker is pretty scraped and scratched and been jumped. But yeah, there's a very simple car and there's a very complicated car, or more complicated car. And then this one, I like to say it looks like a piece of jewelry. But that is track car. Have fun outside, bash, don't care if it breaks. I've actually snapped the rear shock tower flipping it over. Had rubber tires on it. I was sending it off some jumps. But they're very good in their own right. I think if you're on a budget, there's nothing wrong with going with the Rookie Drift. It's $200, I believe, with your own electronics. This is probably $100, maybe $150 total in electronics. This is probably a retail $400 or $500, maybe more in electronics. So definitely a lot of differences. This is still a stock gear diff. I did put thicker oil in it, but that's been my favorite. And then I have an LP86 that I've made some titanium bits and parts for, and that's been kind of like a fun experiment. I don't think it really drives the greatest in my opinion, or maybe I just haven't enjoyed it as much as other people have. And then that's the old chassis. So yeah, kind of my current setups, and super fun. Yeah. But we're approaching 2 p.m. here my time, and I got to get back to some work. But I just wanted to say thank you guys for joining me on this RC drift build. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope maybe there was some information there that would be helpful to you guys. And don't forget to check out my previous videos on all different kind of narrowed down subjects of these RC drift cars. I have one just on how I set up my electronics. I have one just on how I set up shocks. I have one on how I paint the bodies. And then I have a great lengthy video on alignments and a couple different ways to do alignments. One with the alignment rack and one kind of at the track with the camber gauge. And then some fun videos of the outside car shredding too, and a lot more of that to come. This thing's gonna put in some miles this year. And yeah, I'm really gonna focus on higher quality content and videos for the long form, and then the shorts that I put out are gonna be kind of bits and pieces of the long form content going out. So yeah, overall pretty stoked. Had some fun building this car with you guys, and really appreciate all of you tuning in. Again, it was way more people than I had expected, but I know people like to go back to some of these streams and get the information out, so I figured it'd be a good time to have that out before the end of the year. Maybe you'll Santa will bring you a new chassis for Christmas or something like that, and you want to set it up like I set it up. But really appreciate you guys all tuning in, following along, and I will catch you guys on the next one. But yeah, thanks for watching.